Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So we've had a bit of an update this week on Johnny's appeal in the UK pertaining to his libel case. Two updates to be more specific, but they are related to each other. So the first update pertains to an adjournment of the case. Now, an adjournment means a postponement, basically. So it's not a rejection and it's not an acceptance. Now, the term that had people confused in this instance is on paper. An adjournment on paper, or anything on paper, in the legal system means that the decision was made based on the written submissions of the parties. So there was no oral hearing that led to the decision to adjourn. So as we know, Johnny filed his appeal or permission to appeal in December, and then NGN responded. And so the judge made his decision to adjourn based on the submissions that they submitted. Now, if you look at the case tracker, it says that the adjournment was made on the 1st of February of this year. Now, out of context, it may seem confusing as to why an adjournment was granted, but then we find out why. It turns out, as was very much expected, Johnny has filed permission to adduce new evidence. Now, I've talked about this in my appeal video, which will be linked in the description box. But basically, as I said in that video, appeal courts don't like to receive fresh or new evidence unless there are compelling circumstances to do so. An example is if the evidence did not exist at the time of the trial, or it was impossible for any of the parties to be aware of its existence or have access to it. Now, we don't know exactly what Johnny wants to adduce, but we all have a very good idea of what it might be: the charity donations. What makes it almost certain that it is the charity evidence that Johnny wishes to adduce is this emergency declassification application that was put in by Johnny on the 15th of December of last year. So the charity documents were classified as confidential, and Johnny sought to remove or de-designate them. At the time, it may not have made sense without any context, but now it becomes really easy to connect the dots. It's also worth noting that one of Amber's attorneys, Elaine, makes note of this earlier this year in January. As you can see in this footnote, she says that while representing to this court the urgency to de-designate the charity documents under the auspices of needing them for the UK appeal, Mr. Depp's UK counsel did not use these documents for that purpose. The only person who has used these documents was Mr. Waldman, providing them to the press and tweeting about them. So that's her version of events. But again, now that Johnny has filed this application for permission, it becomes almost impossible to deny that this evidence is what Johnny wishes to adduce in the UK. During the trial, evidence of Amber's failure to donate the $7 million was not available to the parties. Since then, we've learned that the donations never took place. And this is a classic example of these exceptional circumstances where the evidence did not exist at the time of trial. Now, many may argue this is a fringe issue. It's got nothing to do with the main case of libel. But thanks to Mr. Justice Nicol, it most certainly does have everything to do with the case. As I mentioned in my recent video about this new information pertaining to the donations, Mr. Justice Nicol expressly referred to these donations as evidence that Amber is an honorable person and that she is not a gold digger. So it greatly contributed to his decision. At least he made it seem like it did. He placed a lot of faith in Amber and her credibility based on that fact. So any argument of the irrelevance of these donations is immediately thrown out. Now, whether the Court of Appeal will arrive at the same conclusion remains to be seen. This is purely my professional opinion. I would definitely argue this point as hard as I could if I were representing Johnny, but that doesn't mean that they're going to see it in the same way. In my opinion, it definitely qualifies for granting permission to adduce this new evidence. Had Mr. Justice Nicol ignored it and made no reference to it at all in his decision, then an argument that the donations are entirely irrelevant would be a strong argument. They would at that point only go to her credibility, as Johnny has argued multiple times by now. So Johnny filed permission to adduce further evidence on the 14th of January this year, and the decision was made to hold an oral hearing to be listed, if possible, between the 15th and the 31st of March, and it's estimated to go on for 2 hours. The reason provided is that the issues raised by both applicants are best resolved at a hearing. So written submissions were deemed to be unsuitable in this particular instance. The rest are just directions to the parties, so NGN and Johnny. NGN have until the 21st of February to respond, and then if necessary, Johnny may respond to that by no later than 4 p.m. on the 28th of February 2021. Now, I do want to draw your attention to the date that this order was made, the 1st of February. So this explains why the case was adjourned on paper on the 1st of February, because they want to hold this hearing first in order to consider this before deciding whether to grant or deny permission to appeal. So for those of you asking whether this is good news, I suppose it is, because at this point, the Court of Appeal could have denied Johnny's application. So the fact that they are willing to hold this hearing to determine whether Johnny has sufficient grounds for introducing new evidence means that they are willing to hear him out. Now, it could still be refused after this hearing, so that's why I don't want everyone to put their hopes up. So now this means, in addition to the original arguments that were included in the skeleton arguments that we discussed in a previous video, the court will also consider this new evidence. I think I have a good idea of what NGN is going to argue, which is that this is all moot. This has nothing to do with whether Amber's allegations were true. The charity donations are an entirely separate topic that has no bearing. I've already presented my arguments as to why that argument should fail, but it's going to be up to the Court of Appeal to decide which argument stands. That's it for this video. It was going to be a quick one for a change, and I hope it cleared things up in relation to why an adjournment was granted, what it means if it's granted on paper, etc. As always, don't forget to let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that the charity donation evidence, so evidence of Amber never donating the $7 million, is an important factor that should be allowed to be introduced with the Court of Appeal? Thank you so much for watching, and a very special and warm thank you to my patrons. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in a future video. Bye.